Hello there everybody, we are back on for part 3 of 100 Days on Fjordur. In the last episode we crafted this new base into these ruins just using a few stone foundations and ramps so we could place our own structures. We also went and did the lava cave on this map. We lost a couple of our Deinonychus, but we got the artifact and we got some cave drops. We also found a skin chest that had a skin in it, but it was also supposed to have some runestones, and it did not have any of those, and we do need to... The first thing I want to do is try and hatch up a bunch more Deinonychus, as I lost quite a few of them in the last cave, and I need heaps more in order to fight a boss on day 25. So I placed down a bunch of torches in one corner of my base and waited for them to hatch. All at once, the eggs begin to hatch, and suddenly I have a line of baby Deinonychus. I imprint on all of them and then shoot them with the soul gun to take them outside, where it's a bit easier to feed them and access their inventories. However, I'm not going to bother imprinting these ones as there's just too many of them and I won't be able to do it effectively. Also, I don't plan to be riding any of these anytime soon. They're just going to be used as fodder in the fight with the boss on day 25. Eventually, these Deinonychus plus a few more are all getting pretty close to being grown up. I did actually decide to cuddle any of them that wanted it, as it was just some free bonus stats I could give them really easily, but I left every other imprinting type until later. I think I've got 13 Deinonychus here. It's not quite enough for the army that I want to build, but it's definitely a good start, and I think I'll continue more breeding later, once the parents have laid some more eggs. So, I just wait for them to grow up, and then we go out on a massive leveling spree to get them some food and level them up. With my massive army of Deinonychus in tow, I go out into the world and I fight some creatures. There was this random onyx flying around, which was weird, as I thought these things only spawned in caves. However, it must be something else, as otherwise it wouldn't be here. I spot a Therizinosaurus, so I tell my Deinonychus to attack it with a basic hit. However, it seems that they're constantly knocking it back and not getting any hits off on it while it's hitting them. So, I go in there and help them. The Therizinosaur falls pretty quickly, and they all eat its body and get the meat, which they need, otherwise they're going to starve to death. After this, I kill a few more creatures, and then I level them all up. Later on that day, I go in search of the Realms Gate, which is a cave that contains the portals to Jotunheim, Vanaheim, and Asgard, the 3 realms on this map. The realms can only be accessed through these portals, and the portals require runestones to activate, which is why I did end up deciding to go and then spawn myself in using admin sheets. I decided to do this because I had confirmed that runestones were supposed to spawn in those skin chests, so I thought it was fair enough, as it was obviously some kind of glitch or bug, as I wasn't getting them already. I spawned myself in 10, as you're supposed to get 5 per skin chest, and I'd already opened 2 on camera, and I'd gone and gotten a few more off cameras. Now, I think I can see the cave in the distance. There's this wall here, and yeah, there are some structures, so I think this'll be it. I've heard that there's no enemies in this cave, so I decide to fly straight in on my Pteranodon. None of my Deinonychus actually have saddles on them anyway, and I forgot to put my main riding one into a soul ball, so I just fly straight in on my Pteranodon. Straight away I can see the portals. It's a very short cave, and there we are. I'm assuming the green is for Vanaheim, which is a forest biome, the orange is for Asgard, which is a plains, and the blue is for Jotunheim, which is a freezing wasteland. I interact with the Jotunheim terminal, and see what I can craft in there. Then I check out what I need for a tech replicator, as I might want to make one of these later on in the run. I need 5 runestones per teleport, which is good as I have 10 already. This means that I can choose 2 of the biomes to check out. However, I do also need 1 per attempt at a world boss, which I need to fight by day 25, so I will need to go and farm a few more runestones, or else I can just visit 1 biome and then save the rest for fighting a world boss. I also placed down one of my teleporters in this cave so I can get back here easily in future. And just like that, day 21 comes to an end. On day 22, I have to fly back to the Realms Gate cave, as for some reason the portal I placed down in there wasn't working. So I have to fly back manually on my Pteranodon, but it's not too big a deal as my base is quite close anyway. I decide to move the portal outside in case it being in the cave was causing it to bug for some reason, so luckily I can just pick it up and move it out there manually. I also had to go back to my base and grab runestones, as stupidly I'd forgotten to bring them with me, and I had to use them if I wanted to enter any of the realms anyway. With that done, I went back into the cave and decided on what realm I would visit first. I originally planned to check out Jotunheim, but I chickened out and went with Vanaheim instead. I hopped off and interacted with the terminal so I could put in my runestones and activate the portal. To do this, I simply interacted with it and then split my stack of runestones. Just like the other one, it costed 5 to enter, so I split my stack, put in the 5, and then I activated the portal. Seems similar to a boss portal from other Ark maps, so it took 30 seconds for me to get in there. After the timer was done, it warped me to Vanaheim, this luscious forest/swamp biome. I looked around for a while in search of a world boss cave or any other dungeon, or even just interesting creatures I could find, but I didn't really find anything, so I eventually went back to my own realm via the teleporter. After giving up on Vanaheim, I continued to explore the main world when I eventually found this spiderweb-covered cave. This was near the edge of the map, but there was a bunch of Trudons around, and I decided to place a portal here so I could come back in future. I was just naming it when I got attacked by some bugs, but my Pteranodon took care of them. However, then I got hit by Trudons, which caused me to start worrying. I did have some really good armor on, Ascendant Flak, but I threw out my Deinonychus and called my Pteranodon to follow, just so I could try and kill these annoying pests, as they were getting quite close to knocking me out with their torpor-inflicting attacks. I threw out my Deinonychus and tried to hop onto him, but I actually mounted my Pteranodon instead for some reason. However, he took care of the Trudons pretty easily, and then I decided to check out the cave. With that done, I went into the cave. It lagged for a second as it loaded in, but it wasn't that bad, indicating that this was quite a small cave. As I was running through, I heard the telltale sign of an Uranio, and then a few of them fell from the ceiling, which was scary. However, they weren't cave-leveled, and the highest one I killed was a 150, so they fell pretty easily, as Uranios are very weak creatures when they're not buffed by cave leveling. I continued to walk through the cave slowly, just in case a few more Uranios were wanting to fall from the ceiling. This turned out to be a good plan, as I rounded the corner, a few more of them did indeed fall off the ceiling and attack me. This was such a cool-looking cave, though. There was this massive room at the end that had massive skulls wrapped up in webs hanging from the roof. So I investigated. This looked suspiciously like a boss arena, as it was a massive wide open space, but I couldn't see a terminal anywhere. I looked around for a bit, trying to find one, and I got attacked by some more Uranios, but I didn't have any luck for the first few minutes. Then I did eventually find it though, and it was across the other side of the cave. I eventually found the boss terminal in the same room that I had already been searching. Here I could summon Itsy and Bitsy for 1 runestone. This was one of Fjordur's world bosses, and I had to kill 1 of 3 of them by day 25, which was very soon around the corner by this point. However, I'd heard that Itsy and Bitsy were probably the hardest out of the 3 world bosses, so I decided to keep looking for one of the other caves. On day 23, I decided to go and check out Jotunheim, the freezing ice realm. I stuck the runestones into the terminal and then activated the portal. Upon arriving in Jotunheim, I instantly realized that it was extremely cold. Like, I was freezing to death even though I was wearing full fur and 2 pieces of Ascendant Flak that had more hypothermic insulation than fur anyway, though not by much. Seriously, the amount of damage I was taking was insane. I would have died within like a minute just by being here and not fighting anything. So I couldn't really stay, as I wouldn't be able to hang around long enough to survive and do anything interesting. So I did decide to leave. When I got back to base, I decided that I'd start breeding up my Deinonychus army, as day 25 was rapidly coming around the corner and I had to fight a boss by then. So I stuck a bunch of females and one male in a messy circle and got them all to start breeding so I could get heaps of eggs really quickly. Soon I had a heap of Deinonychus eggs and they all started hatching. I'd figured out that I could claim them straight away just by shooting them with the soul terminal, which was much easier than claiming them individually, as finding the buttons was quite annoying. I repeated this process a few more times until I had a good 30 Deinonychus that I could use for the boss fight. I continued breeding my Deinonychus for the rest of day 23 and all the way into day 24. By the time I was done, I had about 30, and once they'd all healed up, I'd stuck them inside soul balls, ready for the boss fight. However, before we did that, I wanted to go out and see if I could kill some alpha creatures before we got to the boss. So I went out and found this alpha raptor. I threw out about 5 of my Deinonychus as I thought this would be enough to take it on, but I actually was wrong. For some reason, they weren't attacking it, even though it was hitting them, and then a bunch of wild Deinonychus and another raptor joined in, and all of this together was just too much, and I started losing some of my Deinonychus. So I took the L and ran away. However, a few of my creatures did manage to follow me, so I shot these with the soul gun to save them, and then I continued to run away from the alpha raptor. It took a while, but I eventually lost it using the Deinonychus' jump and causing it to fall into a chasm. For the rest of day 24, I had to fly back to the spider cave because the portal I'd placed outside wasn't working for some reason. I killed the Aranios that were continuously spawning on top of me, and then I began throwing out my Deinonychus army in a circular pattern around the arena so that they would surround the boss when it spawned in. Eventually, I'd gotten all my Deinonychus out and leveled up, but the circular pattern had been screwed up because Aranios had fallen from the ceiling again and attacked me, which had caused all the Deinonychus to run to my aid and abandon their positions. I continued to level them up until it eventually became day 25, and then I initiated the boss fight. On day 25, I hopped on my Deinonychus, I went to the terminal, and I stuck in a few runestones. I'd gone to the lava cave and farmed another chest so that I could summon it. Just like that, it did a short craft animation, and then Itsy and Bitsy spawned in. I whistled all my Deinonychus to attack that one spider, so that one would die first and the damage would go down by a bit. I helped out as much as I could by killing the minions. Everything was going pretty well as I was hitting for ridiculously high 2000 damage numbers for some reason. I think this was actually the Deinonychus bleed, which proved to be busted in this fight. The bleed completely carried me, as the spiders have huge health, and the bleed is based on a percentage of their max HP. The first spider fell pretty quickly, and at this point I was pretty confident that I'd won, despite the fact that a lot of my Deinonychus were beginning to die. The bleed was just so strong here, and it made me realize how good Deinonychus were for boss fights. Although, I'm thinking this might have been an oversight, as this does seem a little bit too overpowered. My Deinonychus was also hitting for heaps of damage as it had the pack leader bonus from about 10 others. And just like that, Itsy and Bitsy fell, and the first milestone was complete. The challenge would continue until I had to fight one of the vanilla arc bosses on day 50. After killing the boss, I went out and decided to use the rest of my Deinonychus to farm some alpha creatures, as I wanted to get a crossbow better than the one I currently had to make taming a bit easier. So, I also got some decent loot from the boss. The only notable things were a journeyman fur cap, which would help me survive Jotunheim, and a Mastercraft Mosasaurus saddle, which I could grind up for heaps of materials later on when I got an industrial grinder. I found this Alpha Kano here, which turned out to be a level 145. However, I was pretty confident that my Deinonychus could take it, so I whistled them to attack. I just had to get... The whistles are so finicky, I wish they were a bit easier to use. There we are. I got it, so I moved out of the way and let my Deinonychus go in. However, they all bunched up, which was annoying, as it meant that only a few of them could land hits at a time. Annoyingly, they all knocked the Kano off the cliff, but luckily Deinonychus are immune to fall damage, so this wasn't too much of an issue. It also managed to get my Deinonychus into a better pattern, and they kind of surrounded the Kano, which was good. Continued getting knocked down cliffs, which was kind of funny, and we just had to chase after it and keep hitting it. It was looking pretty good by this stage, as the bleed was doing work as well, as it always does on high health creatures. I could see blood on the Carno by now, which meant it was going to die pretty soon. But then my Deinonychus started dying as well, which was concerning. I didn't really care if a few of the ones died, as it was pretty easy to breed some more, but I definitely didn't want to lose the one I was riding, as it was quite a high level and it had definitely had some sentimental value. But just like that, I killed the Alpha Carno. Sadly, there was no crossbow, but oh well, I'll continue looking. Back to the Alpha Raptor that had killed a few of my Deinonychus yesterday and whistled my army to attack. They all took off the cliff and began hitting it. Luckily, they actually did attack it this time and didn't just sit there and die. Again, their knockback was so huge that they actually managed to stun lock the raptor and keep it in a position where it barely even hit them. I helped out, but I didn't really need to. The raptor was dead. And this time, I was so lucky and got a Mastercraft crossbow, which is exactly what I was looking for. This would nearly double my damage and thus torpor output from trank arrows, and means I could tame creatures much faster and would only need to use about half of the tranquilizer arrows to do it. I was just back at my base when I noticed this Therizinosaur up on the hill, and it turned out to be a 145 male, which is insane, as I already knew where multiple high-level females were. So I decided to tame it up. And tried to lure the Therizino in, but this was too painful on my Pteranodon, so eventually I just decided to go back to my base, park the Pteranodon, and do it on foot. Got back to the trap with my armor taken off so it wouldn't break when I got hit by the Therizino. I realized that once again it had disappeared. It was like the Baryonyx from day 5 all over again. However, I did continue looking until eventually I decided that I'd check in my base, as it might have followed my Pteranodon. Therizinosaurus are annoyingly persistent creatures, and if you annoy them for one reason or another, they will seriously follow you to the ends of the earth until they kill your creature. For ages, I checked back at my base, and lo and behold, there it was. I had no idea how it had managed to get across the bridges without falling off, but it had done it in any case, and I was very glad that it hadn't breached the inner walls of my base and killed my creatures, because a 145 Therizino would definitely be capable of that, and even if it hadn't killed them, I still would have died to it. The next morning, I managed to get the Therizinosaurus into my trap and began knocking it out with my new crossbow. Because it did so much more damage, it only took about 50 arrows, which was pretty reasonable for a 145 Therizinosaur. However, it did still take quite a while, so we'll be back when it's unconscious. Okay, it's down, and it's just woken up, tamed. I actually had to use some narco berries to keep it unconscious, as these things really lose torpor so fast, and they'll easily wake up, even on my super fast taming settings. So I stuck it in the cryopod, and then went to find one of the other Therizinosaurs that I'd seen before. All done, I went up on my Deinonychus to try and find the next Therizinosaur. This one was a 130 female that I'd seen earlier while on my Pteranodon. It was just over the top of this cliff, so once I got up with my Deinonychus, it was pretty easy just to get its attention and then lure it back to the trap. So I went over there, walked up to it, and let it get annoyed, and then it chased me off the cliff and all the way back to the trap. Got him back to the trap, I hopped off my Deinonychus and lured him in there myself. However, I did die as he trapped me up against the wall with his knockback and I couldn't escape in time. When I got back to the trap, she was still in there, so all I had to do was shut the door and then I could start knocking her out. As I was knocking him out, it started to get dark, and pretty soon it would be day 27. So I did actually end up forgetting to hit the record button for day 27. However, it was a pretty lucky time to do it, as I didn't really do anything interesting. All I did was I continued to knock out that Therizinosaur that we'd seen in the trap and tamed it, and I also went back to my old base and tamed the 140 female Theri that was over there, which we spotted in the first episode, I think on day 6 or 7, but I'm not 100% sure. So I just tamed those ones, and then I brought them all back to base and started breeding them. This time they all had different stats, which meant I would need to selectively breed eggs until I got a couple of individuals that had all of the best stats on one creature, and then I could breed an army from those creatures. I didn't think the Deinonychus were going to cut it for the vanilla arc bosses on day 50, so I decided that these Therizinosaurs would work perfectly fine, as they are almost all as strong as a T-Rex. Theris are very good combat creatures. But anyway, I threw out these eggs and started hatching them, and I got a couple of baby Therizinosaurus. By the time I actually had a breeding pair, day 28 was nearly over. Took me almost all the day to do this, but it was worth it, as in the end I had creatures with over 400% melee damage and over 6,000 health. These would be perfect to found an army which would later take on some of the vanilla arc bosses. However, I also wanted to breed one of my own personal Therizinosaurs, which I would imprint, as this would be perfect for taking on alpha creatures without the need for making a massive army and throwing it out of cryopods each time, which was getting kind of annoying. In the afternoon of day 29, I went out on my own newly imprinted Therizinosaur to go and see how many resources it could collect. They have this tickle attack that collects an insane amount of fiber. I got over 1,000 from using it just once, which is going to make life so much easier. I won't have to go handpick bushes anymore. And he's hitting for 333 damage, which is really good as well. Keep in mind that this is unleveled and without a mate boost. He can also gather wood perfectly, which is great. This will also mean that I don't have to go and harvest things with a hatchet, and he can harvest thatch pretty well as well. However, he does not seem to be able to collect berries, but that's alright, although actually I think he has a bite attack that can collect berries. But I don't need berries at the moment, so I won't use that yet. Just gonna go kill this tech parasaur as well. What's the electronic harvesting like? And yeah, he's already getting nearly double the amount of electronics that I would get just by mining one with my pickaxe, so that's good. As I was waiting for my army of Therizinos to breed up, I decided to go and try to find some more caves so I could test out my newly imprinted main one. I knew where a couple of them were, so I tried both of these. The first of these caves was in the snowy mountains, and it was a small ruin built into the side of the cliff. Luckily, my Therizinosaurus could just fit through here, even though it looked like my head was getting nicked. So, I went through. There was this massive well down at the end of the cave, which is kind of scary. In the end, I was wanting to use my Deinonychus to get down here, as they're immune to fall damage, but I'd actually forgotten to take the one that had a saddle on it with me, so I just stuck my Theri in a ball and jumped down myself. Luckily, the fall damage didn't kill me. The well led to another tomb-like section, where I quickly threw out my Therizinosaurus. The only problem was that it couldn't fit through this gap. So, I shot it with the soul gun to put it into a ball, and then tried to throw it out at the end of this tunnel, however it wouldn't fit in this area. However, it went out on the next time, and I could actually ride it through here, which was good, even though it only just fit. I continued slowly through this cave, searching for drops or enemies, but I hadn't seen any of either of those yet. Then I came to this room, which looked like a dead end. However, the rock on my right side was actually breakable, so I destroyed this and continued on through the cave. After breaking the rock, I put my Therizinosaurus into another soul ball and quickly threw it out again, as this passageway seemed to be quite wide and my Theri could easily fit. This looked like a very cool sunlit room, but it seemed to be the kind of space where you'd expect enemies, however there were none here. I went up onto this ledge to see if there was a drop, because I thought I saw one, but no, it was just this weird rock or piece of snow reflecting the light. There wasn't really anything interesting in this room, so I jumped off the cliff, using the dismount strategy to avoid damaging my Theri, and continued down through the cave. I could see a waterfall, which was interesting, and there appeared to be another hole at the end of this. I cautiously made my way down, trying to avoid the fall damage on my Theri, and again used the dismount strategy right before I hit the ground. My Theri kind of got stuck on this rock, and I couldn't get to it for some reason, even though I was trying to jump and walk towards it. So, I quickly gave up on this, whistled it to follow me, and then I mounted him again, once he was a suitable distance away. Down this cliff, I could see a massive pond with a few little islands, so I jumped off as I was pretty confident my Theri would be able to fight anything that was in here. I leapt off my ferry to avoid fall damage once again, and then jumped on him again. There didn't really seem to be much down here, at least on the surface, but it seemed that the cave did continue down underwater. I wasn't really willing to go do that yet, as I didn't have a scuba tank, so in the end I just waited and moved around this room a bit until I found an alternate exit. So I soulballed my ferry and then grappled my way up to the ledge where I could see that there was a light and what looked like an exit from the cave, or else a continuation. I wasn't 100% sure. Luckily, the grapple could reach it, so I pulled myself over and began to leave the cave. However, I would have to come back here at some point, as I was fairly certain that the cave continued underwater. I just didn't have the scuba gear necessary to do that yet, and I didn't have an underwater creature either, so I'd have to get one of those at some point. Anyway, I continued to make my way out of here. I threw out my ferry, mounted him, and continued walking. This definitely did seem to be an exit, as I could see some other light. That was indeed an exit, so I left and continued to the next cave that I'd seen. This one was a massive ruin carved into the side of the mountain. There was quite a bit of cave lag as I entered, which indicated that it was quite a large cave. However, I did get kicked off my Pteranodon, which hopefully meant that it was a combat cave and not just a place for a base. I soulballed my Pteranodon and then got out my ferry again and continued through the cave. Straight away, I could see that this place was huge and filled with some really interesting stuff. I saw some onyx, but for some reason they weren't attacking me. I think this is just because the Therizinosaur is quite a large creature, and most things don't attack large creatures in fear of retaliation. They actually left me alone, so that was useful. I let them live because of this and made my way through the cave. There were also a few scorpions which I killed, and I didn't really have time to see if they were wanting to attack me or not, but I assumed that they would have. With those dead, I continued through the cave, but sadly these were the only enemies I encountered, despite what looked like a wyvern trench below me. I carried on over this golden-laid bridge to find this massive crystal. I didn't really know what this was for, and I probably should have tried mining it in hindsight to see if it gave me anything interesting, but I continued on through the cave, around it, and into this next room. There wasn't really anything interesting in here, just this hole with a massive, deep pond that was filled with saber-toothed salmon. I did jump in there later on and have a quick look what was there, but it was another situation where I would need an oxygen tank if I wanted to explore further, so I turned around and left this room. In the next room I found there wasn't anything interesting at first, as I assumed that those items you can see there are just part of the terrain and not interactable. However, luckily, I jumped off my ferry and tried mining them with a pickaxe, which turned out to be a very good decision, as they gave me metal ingots, polymer, and obsidian, all of which are very valuable mid to end game resources. So, I mined all the crates, and then I left the cave. I couldn't find any other rooms or anything else interesting, except from whatever was underneath the pond cave. I would have to come back here when I had a scuba tank as well. To finish off the day, I decided to try and kill this alpha T-Rex that had been roaming around on the plains by the castle for ages. I would do this using my new imprinted theory and all the other ones that I'd been raising for an army as well. It would hopefully give them heaps of levels, as well as any other nice loot that was on the T-Rex itself. After this, I would also go and fight Itsy and Bitsy to try and see if I could get some more loot from them. However, it was getting dark, and that signaled the end of day 30, so if you want to see those fights, check in the next episode. Thanks for watching. Bye.